Last Epoch has just come out of early access on February 21st to a wide range of reviews. Mostly positive, talking to many of the great step forward that the title poses for the action RPG genre. But how does it compare to the two big titans in the genre, Path of Exile and Diablo? What if you bought Diablo expecting gold and you're either burnt out from playing or you feel like you got burnt from the experience? How is Last Epoch any different than any other clone of its like? Well, in this video, we'll be tackling just that by taking apart my just shy of 100 hours of playtime on Last Epoch across the last 2 years, as well as my experience with the game's development support to give you a sense of what the future might hold. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by upfronting the knowledge in my video to see if it's the right one for you. So with that being said, let me just give you my impression of Last Epoch. I love it. I think it's everything I wanted in Diablo 4 at the start of Season 1 that the game just fell flat on. It doesn't have the insane complexity of Path of Exile, but I think that's okay because my reading comprehension is barely above a third grader's. I think that comparing a game to others is diminutive, but I'll be doing it a lot in this video because I want to create a point of relation for people coming from these other games. I believe games should be taken on their own merit in the context in which they exist, but this saves me some time from having to explain every little thing. With Last Epoch, I get just enough complexity that is highly approachable from every other user type, from the casual to the min-maxer, as well as being rewarding for both. You can have the sweaty build of the month or a custom built one and clear 90-95% of the content. Narrative-wise, Last Epoch doesn't have the punch that Diablo does. I'll admit that, but that's because Last Epoch spends a lot of its story setting up the world for you, something that Diablo just doesn't need to do. You've got almost 20 years of experience knowing the Diablo world. The story, by the way, for Last Epoch has tons of nods to games like Chrono Trigger or Cthulhu-inspired mythos for its creatures and antagonists. With the launch, the team of 11th Hour Games did a massive overhaul to animations, shadows, dynamic scenes such as weather, and more to really add to the polish of the 1.0 transition. It doesn't have the crispy, smooth animation and presentation of Diablo 4, I'll fully admit that, but we're also looking at a dev team that's less than 30 people large, with half of that being just simply artists. So it's quite telling that they can go toe-to-toe with a AAA studio and score an easy knockout, depending on your perspective, of course. But what about the bad? Well, as of the time of this video going live, 11th Hour has been struggling with the game server due to the massive positive reception the game has received, so playing can be a little rough right now. And to their credit, they've given constant hour-by-hour updates as well as a free cosmetic for just simply bearing with them. Also, the game systems, while not as complex as Path of Exile, they are still complex, so the learning curve will initially be a struggle for a lot of action RPG fans that are familiar with a more point-and-click style, but I promise that will kind of fall to the wayside. Lastly, the endgame, the monolith and dungeon systems can seem very repetitive, but to me, they're 100% of what I want out of an action RPG. Tons of killing on different maps to fight a big boss at the end with a shiny treasure chest. There's a mini game attached to the monolith system, which we'll cover, but to break it down to its constituent parts, it's killing monsters on different maps to fill up a bar, which then allows you to fight the boss. All those things said, I'd easily give Last Epoch a hard 8, soft 9 out of 10, off of what you're looking for, kind of depending upon my preferences and what I look for in a game. Lasting endgame, engaging and diverse character builds, enjoyable graphics, and a dev house that communicates are what make this a 9 out of 10 for me. You can jump ahead to any part of this video that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And if that's all you wanted to know, please just feel free to shut the video down. Either go ahead and play Last Epoch or don't. Skip it and go whatever to the next action RPG or Path of Exile 2 when it comes out later this year or early next year. But if that's all you want to know, like I said, feel free to just go ahead and shut the video down. But if you did enjoy this video or you found some useful information, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. And if you end up picking up the game, you can use my Nexus Store in the description and pinned comment, which will earn a commission for me and help support the channel. Well, let's get started here on my review for Last Epoch. Will Last Epoch burn you like Diablo 4? So jumping into this review, let's start off with the narrative, because I think that's a pretty big distinguishing point between, I'd say, Last Epoch and maybe, well, Diablo, like the entire Diablo series for that matter. And whether you pronounce it Epoch or Epic, I don't know. I'm just going to say Epoch because, like I said, I can barely read above a third grade comprehension level. And the story of Last Epoch pretty much follows a specific set of circumstances. And now when you start the game, you have a nice intro to the story of the game, but we didn't have that before. You kind of used to have to sleuth it through stuff in the game. And Etera is basically the god that creates everything, like kind of like the super god. And when you traverse through the game, you jump from era to era, not unlike Chrono Trigger, right, where you're jumping through time. The ancient era, the divine era, the ruin era, the end of time. And each one of those is called an epoch, hence, the term Last Epoch. And essentially, Etera's children, or our gods, it comes down to a war between them. And that's kind of where we're at the beginning of the story. You've got Herat of the frozen tundra in the north, Lagon of sea in the west, Majasa of the desert in the south, and Rye, not to be confused with Rylay, if you're a Call of Cthulhu fan, of the endless skies in the east. And Rye, for the most part, kind of goes to war with everyone, and this is where the story picks up. But the kind of cool thing here is when we play Diablo, or we play Last Epoch, or we play Path of Exile or Titan Quest or any of these cool action RPGs, the story or the motivation for your character can be a little convoluted. And I think it kind of leads you to wonder, how does my character play into the story? I think in more recent years with like Diablo 3 and 4, it's become a little bit more, like I said, oh, you're a Nephilim, or you're a descendant of like a hybrid Nephilim, or you're like a dormant one or whatever. I don't know, stupid shit like that. But for Last Epoch, the way that this works is it's going to come down to your individual character as far as the class you choose. Now, every single one of these gods has a city that's predominantly dedicated to them, and there's like one or two other little cities outside of that in the world. But for example, if you choose the Acolyte was banned from the city of mages and scholars, Welrin, after practicing dark magic, and after hearing of Rye's attack, she goes to Welrin to watch it burn. So that's the Acolyte, that's the Necromancer character. So you kind of see that motivation coming out of the character right from the start. The Mage is an Acolyte from Welrin, and he is on the search for trying to find a way to stop Rye. Or you take a look at the Sentinel. The Sentinel is a former blacksmith who becomes a soldier in Rye's army and then goes, I don't like all this destruction and murder and chaos. I'm actually going to fight against it. Or the Primalist is from Heroborea, and he goes to the Temple of Etera to kind of try to find out how to defeat Rye and how to figure all this out. Or the Rogue is really cool. The Rogue actually has a direct connection to one of the story characters because they're hired by that story character to kill herself. So it's a really, really kind of awesome motivation for the narrative. But like I said before, the narrative for Last Epoch is a little rough and tumble when it comes to really enabling or jumping into it by comparison to the many cinematics that we get when we jump through like a Diablo, right? Or if we're comparing this again to a Path of Exile, I don't even know what the hell the story is of Path of Exile. So it's not the clearest narrative, but the narrative is there. And what I do like about the narrative for Last Epoch is, like I said, it's very clear as to the motivation of your character, what you are doing in the world, why you're doing it, and why you're not just some like random bystander who's just trying to, bounce for the most part. So you're going to find a lot of things about this game pretty interesting from the narrative, and you're going to find little bits of script hidden, not even hidden, but pretty much strewn all around the world that are going to give you more of an insight into each one of the gods. Or you'll find about kind of the genesis of the world between Etera and Orobis, which is like Ouroboros, but all the many, many, many things, the many races that inhabit this world and why they are this or that, like the Osprix, the bird-like race, you have all these many kind of things that are going to interact and overlap with you, and you'll have a very clear-cut understanding of who they are. It just takes time to kind of unravel that. But that's our narrative for Last Epoch, and if that is a big driving factor for you in an ARPG, it's worth bringing up. And I think, like I said, too, it's also a really big differentiating point when it comes to looking at other action RPGs in this genre. So when you actually boot up this game, Last Epoch, you're going to find a character selection screen, not unlike pretty much any other action RPG for that matter. You've got a difference, though, between choosing a cycle character or a legacy character. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the action RPG genre, you are familiar with the way seasons work. If you are new to this, or maybe you came back with Diablo 4 and seasons are a brand new thing for you, let me just quickly explain that, because this has kind of been the standard for ARPGs since even Diablo 2. The way cycles work, or seasons for that matter, you create a character during the cycle. And when the cycle ends, which is a set amount of time, there's a leaderboard and everything, your character transfers in from cycle to legacy. So here are all my legacy characters that will always exist in perpetuity. Anything I do on cycle then just pushes into legacy. And the new cycle starts, and we all start brand new if you want. You can just simply play a legacy character and stay on a legacy character if you so wish. Now, what's important to note here with Last Epoch, and why this is kind of worth bringing up in this review, is that the way that they've addressed this is they don't want cycles to initially be something that has a huge barrier of entry for people. I think they kind of saw the response that a lot of people had to the first season of Diablo 4, saying, well, we don't want to ostracize people that are coming into the game for the first time, or maybe they can't play with their friends or something like that. Let's kind of create two different, a cycle and a legacy, that are the same. So everything that was added in the first cycle was also added to legacy. And that will happen, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but maybe kind of quote me, I don't know, I'm kind of stupid. For the next 2 cycles, things are going to match up with legacy, and then they're going to start to eventually break away. They wanted cycle to feel similar to, they wanted cycle to be rewarding, but they also wanted legacy to feel fun and engaging. They didn't want people to come into the game for the first time and go, well, why am I not just playing cycle? I don't want to make a new character every time. This is boring to me. So just to kind of bring that up right there. And you also have the ability to switch and just simply play an offline character. You can even boot the game in a solely offline mode, which is actually very nice. And if you don't know what that really means, let's say you go to jump on an airplane and you have to use airplane mode and you can't connect to the internet in any way, shape, or form. You can just entirely play offline. You don't even have to tap into any online source to verify, blah, 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 blah. You're all good. Just simply play 100% offline. But now that we've talked about these cycles, these legacies and stuff like that, what does it look like from a character creation perspective, or at least a class diversity perspective? And with that, we have 5 archetypes or classes. But to truly kind of jump into this, we don't have just 5 classes, we really have 15. Because every single one of these classes has 3 masteries. And even though you can kind of overlap each one of these masteries, they, by and large, play either entirely different or completely morph the class. Take, for example, here, the Mage. Mage, it's a spellcaster. Look at this guy, dude, right? He looks like a well-groomed Tywin Lannister Gandalf clone. And his mastery is Sorcerer, for example. Sorcerer is just going to play like it does any spellcaster. If I'm using Diablo as an example here, this is your Wizard, this is your D2 Sorcerer, this is your, is it Mage or Sorcerer in D4? I can't even remember. I put so many damn hours in the game. So it's just your generic caster. Or I go Spellblade, and now I'm not casting spells in the conventional way of a sorcerer. I'm now trying to blend martial prowess with mastery of spells, as it says over here. And yeah, you'll still definitely overlap and use your base kit of spells and your spells as a Spellblade, but you can also put a couple points into Sorcerer and pull the first 2 skills from their mastery tree. So you can blend these things, but what I'm trying to get at is that these subclasses, these masteries, really do change the way you approach these classes. And I think that's one of the biggest draws to this game for me. I can boot up Titan Quest, and I can make someone who specializes in war and someone who specializes in fire. Okay, cool, that's a set type of character. Same thing for Grim Dawn, it's made by the same company. And I've made 2 different things into one thing, right? Or I play Diablo, and I've gone ahead and made a character, and I'm going to play a druid. Well, my druid kind of has to live within a very narrow constraint. Sure, I've got a bunch of skills, but the skills have tags, and they kind of have to play along. Or if I play that other one, Path of Exile, I can jump into a fucking solar system or whatever and go through a whole bunch of skills. This is kind of that sits in between Diablo, and it sits in between Path of Exile to deliver a ton of skills and a lot of customization while also giving you a different playstyle with every single mastery selection. Take the Rune Master as the last one in this example here. They have this ability right here called Runic Invocation. And how this works is I cast a lightning, a fire, or a cold skill, and I generate I generate a rune that corresponds to the element. And then I create a combination and cast a new spell from Runic Invocation. So if I cast Fireball twice and then Lightning Bolt, then Runic Invocation casts a different spell than if I had cast Lightning Bolt and 2 Fireballs. So you can combo these like Dance Dance Revolution, Runic Invocation sets of spells together to kind of weave spells in a way that fits you. And I really like this about the game. It takes a lot of very fun mechanics and makes them very interesting. Take the Rogue, for example. Blade Dancer, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's very much like a Twisting Blades Rogue in Diablo 4. Or a Marksman. It's just a Marksman style of Rogue character. Cool, great. I understand those two. But Falconer is a real big change on the way you approach a minion class. Sure, this person summons a Falcon, and that Falcon is with you and attacks with you, but your abilities are actually linked in with the Falcon. So take a look here. Your Falcon ascends high into the sky, then dive bombs the target location at high speed, dealing a high amount of physical damage to enemies in the area. What they wanted this class to feel like was one where the Falcon is an extension of your character directly and less of like, oh, it's a companion that is autonomously doing its own things. Your abilities rely on the Falcon, and the Falcon's damage and everything like that comes from you. So it's a really cool, like, not to sound corporate, but synergistic union between both of you. And I like that a lot. And again, too, taking a look even at your Acolyte, your Necromancer. This is just a generic Necromancer, right? We've seen it in Diablo. We've seen it in Path of Exile. It's in every ARPG. But you summon a veritable legion of undead, and that's really goddamn cool to me. So you have a lot of class diversity that exists here. Sentinel here, for example, the Forge Guard summons up a bunch of suits of armor and disembodied weapons that attack for him. Paladin is a paladin. Void Knight is kind of like a Death Knight style character using void damage to do a bunch of things. Or you've got lastly the Primalist, which is essentially your quote unquote druid, but you can be a Beastmaster and summon tons of different styles of beasts. You can have a raptor, a bear, a saber-toothed tiger, and any of the other Power Rangers, including a scorpion. And you also get a generic wolf and crows as a generic package for the Primalist. But you can be a shaman and focus on the elemental magic or totems, like if you're playing World of Warcraft, or a druid who can shapeshift into a ton of things, a werebear, a spriggan, or a swarmblade. Think of a StarCraft Mutalisk, or maybe like a Tyrannid warrior, if you're familiar with Warhammer 40,000. But what I like about this, like I've said before, is that, yeah, I've got 5 classes, and I've got 3 subclasses for each of those, you know, the masteries. But it really is just so much more than that. There's so much class diversity in this game that I think it's going to bring you coming back to play tons of different times. When I think of the seasons for a lot of other games, the 2 standouts, of course, are always going to be Diablo and Path of Exile. It kind of just comes down to choosing a lot of the same cookie cutters. And what I like about this is, sure, there's 15 classes, but this is going to lead to the next question in the next section of this video. What is that build viability like? Is it even worth it to play all 15 different classes? Which ones are completely ass broken? Why even bother with 15 if I can't even play 15? Just as a heads up before we even get into that, the only 2 that are really kind of looking for reworks but are still very strong in their own right with their own like a nice good step-by-step guide are Shaman and Forge Guard. That's it. That's it. The rest are like out of the box. You could have no knowledge of the game and build an amazing character. And you still can too with Forge Guard and Shaman. You just kind of need to know a little bit more about how certain skills play together to make the build really kick off. But let's now show off how some of this build diversity can kick in. So for this, I've switched on over to my Beastmaster to show you a little bit more about the actual skills and how to jump into them. So when I jump over here, I can see all this awesome stuff. I've got all my summons, all my everything. And what I like about this game is, yes, you can jump online. You can look at lastepochbuilds.com, whatever the hell the URL is, or Maxroll, or any other content creator who's made tons of builds. This game's been out for 4 years, right, in early access. There's lots of tried and true builds already out there, and you can jump into them. But what a lot of people will simply tell you in global chat or whatever is that you can really just choose a skill, look at the whole entire web that you get here. And if you did not know this, you specialize in one of 5 skills here. You have 5 slots you can drop any of your skills into, and that basically unlocks these talent trees. And your skills will have these little circular nodes that just passively upgrade them, or these hexagons that will in some way, shape, or form mutate or upgrade or change or dynamically just kind of do something different to the skill. Take, for example, here this one. I type in lightning up here in the top, and I want to make a whole bunch of lightning-focused attacks and abilities, well, now I can make it so that your wolves have a chance to retaliate with Stormbolt when hit. Well, what's Stormbolt? I hold down Alt, and there you go. It gives me all this great information. So I can make a really cool Thunder build that maybe there doesn't exist that online right now. There's no real good Thunder build that I can jump into. Well, I can just do it by following the what's it called? The breadcrumbs here of just making a lightning build character. What about my swipe abilities? Okay, what if I type in lightning over here? Oh, it exists. So what I like about this game is that yes, you've got class diversity, but you have the build viability within that class diversity to make anything work in the way that you want to play it. Do you want to play a Lightning Beastmaster? Well, there's plenty of ways to do it. Or I can just focus on making my beasts really good through other capabilities within my existing skills that are not beast summoning skills. This is a really good example here. Aspect of the Panther. I can have this apply to my, what am I called? Like my Saber-Tooth Tiger or my wolves or whatever it is. I can extend these things out, and this makes things so fun. And you get it from your skills here. Like I said, more here's a frenzy totem that now I can jump over here into, is this cold? Oh, that's lightning. I don't remember what this is. Yeah, here's all the lightning stuff. I knew there was lightning somewhere. So I can really jump into more stuff over here. Ice Thorns or Improved Thorn Idol. Like, you have a whole bunch of directions you can take everything, and that's something I really enjoy. And like I said, it's viable. This game is hard at the end of the game, but not too hard. It's not completely insurmountable. And in the last couple patches, they've been increasing monster density and increasing difficulty of the game deliberately at a slower rate to make it so that we can kind of take on that higher aggression, that higher monster density, that higher difficulty, rather than just flipping a switch and say, hey, enjoy a 40% uptick to everything, you know, zippity-doo-dah, bye-bye. Like, no, it's an actual good progression to stuff. And outside of our skills and specs, I can jump over here to passives, and I get more of that granularity. Well, hey, I as a primalist am going to be summoning up tons of companions. Well, let me get this stuff that helps my minion health. Well, let me get this little guy here that increases my health, but then this one down the road, increase minion damage granted. So I get all these really cool benefits by jumping into this. But you know what? I'm a primalist, and I want to dual wield. Well, here you go. Harmony of Blades can equip axes and swords in your offhand. So you have lots of ways to make the existing characters, the existing 15 classes, diverse and different. I think that's kind of what makes it fun. Is I could follow a build guide online for the Beastmaster and be 100% someone else's build, which is, you know, you're playing someone else the way someone else would play. Or I can sit down here and I can take that build and morph it just a little bit and make it so, you know what, hey, they went really hard in all 5 of these skills. Well, what if I swap out Swipe here and I get the newly changed Tempest Strike or the newly added Gathering Storm, and really lean into these new directions for the characters and have a lot of fun with it. So I think that this is one of the best things about the game, is it encourages you as the gamer to either play the min-maxi way if you want, or just play casual. Choose an element, choose a certain feature you like. Maybe it's bleed damage, maybe it's minions, whatever it is, and just chase it. You can chase it in almost all of your skills, because every skill for one archetype, one tag or ability for one archetype is going to be present in most, if not all, the skills. And you can see this reflected by just taking a look at this entire screen. If any of these icons are grayed out, it means you can morph the damage of one of these icons into that. So Maelstrom does cold damage, but I can make it do lightning or physical. Or Fury Leap does physical, but I can make it do lightning. So just at a glance, just looking at this, without having to go, oh man, I don't have the time. I got 3 kids. What the hell does all this crap mean? Well, I can just go right here and go, oh, well, Tornado can be a fire ability. Let me type fire into here. Oh, okay, well, this is where I gotta go. Done. Clear, simple. I'm just in the game and out. I don't have to spend a lot of time doing this if I don't want. There's a lot of cookie crumbs. Is that the word I'm going to use? I'm going to stick with it again, I guess, Hansel and Gretel. But a lot of little crumbs that are left to you that you can just simply gobble up to make the build you want, with a lot of context tips, rather than just kind of blindly groping around going, I hope the percentages and multiplicative additive stuff overlaps here. Nope. Choose something, stick with it, and you're going to have just fine of a build that can clear beginning, middle, and end game. Another big draw here for this game, too, is a lot of the quality of life improvements and a lot of the gameplay systems that I really like, without even jumping into combat yet, which we will show off obviously in a little bit, is just simply navigating through things like your inventory. I have a sort button, which is easy enough. I have a transfer materials button, which is easy enough too. I can put all my crafting materials into a shared stash right here. Easy to take care of. We'll jump into crafting a little bit. But also too, if I hover over this thing and it says, okay, cold damage, increased stun chance, minion spell damage, bow damage, what does all this mean? I'm gonna hold down Alt and it explains all of it. Or you know what, this says +7 cold damage. What is the range of that cold damage on the prefix? Okay, cool. Now I press Control and Alt and I've got all the information. Or I hold down just Control and I've got all the information to compare it. You've got a lot of little cool modifiers you can do when you hover over stuff, which I really, really like. And that is something that I think that it's wild to me that's not more prevalent in more games. You kind of have to usually go through more ways to unlock that or see that through options and settings and what have you. I think just simple modifiers of Control and Alt gives me all the information I need if I want it. I can see the tiers of my prefixes and affixes. So if I go to press F, which is the crafting system in this game, I can use this and I can see, oh, okay, well, this is a tier 1, a tier 3, a tier 4, and a tier 1. But I could have just held down Control and Alt and gotten all that information rather than having to do this. It allows me to quickly push through looking and analyzing all this goddamn shit I'm going to get in this game, because that's how action RPGs work, right? You just have tons and tons of items on the ground, which brings me to another really big point. Which is a more and more prevalent thing in the genre of action RPGs, but loot filters. This one is set up that I simply pulled off the internet, and then I modified it to make it work for me. And you've got up to 75 rules that you can work in here. Anything that's in the top overrides anything below it. So hide all normal magic item rares. Well, recolor build idols to affixes. That will take precedent over the other one, and it'll keep going all the way down. So this one at the very top has the most priority, which then allows me, so let's go ahead and take some of my items and just drop them on the ground. You can see here that some of these aren't showing up, because the ones that aren't showing up are outside of my loot filter, because I've set my loot filter to specifically look for things that buff up the stats that this character uses as per the build, which is really fun. So I pop open a chest and I don't need to sift through 25 items going, okay, that doesn't have a, that's a low roll, that's a low roll, that's a high roll for that. Oh, that's not, I don't even need that. I don't need that. Okay, I'm gonna mark all these for salvage, any of that crap. I don't do it. I'm gonna hold down X if I want and see all the items on the ground, and then just pick up all of the stuff if I want or what I don't need. And that way, when I come over here to my inventory and press F again to go to my forge, any item that I bring into this location that I want to break down for material, I know everything here is relevant to my character because I've set the loot filters up to make it make sense for me. And that, I think, is a really big draw to this game. Yeah, sure, I'm jumping in an action RPG. It's going to take hours of my time, but at least I know, dude, look at that guy. At least I know that hours of my time are going to be concentrated hours. It's not me spending hours sleuthing through all the spoils of war that it's just going to cause me so much time and a headache. Or if I jump over here into my stash, I have two things. I've got categories on the top and stash tabs at the bottom. Categories and stash tabs, infinite amount. The only thing that costs money is adding a stash tab, and it progresses up every time you do it. But categories you can add infinitely. So I've got, okay, here's my uniques and sets. Well, I've got them broken into levels, 1 to 15, 16 to 30, 31 to 35. And this goes all the way here up to 71 plus and into sets. So the organization, the inventory management, all this stuff is such a huge quality of life improvement for me when it comes to playing RPGs that I really love this about Last Epoch. And I can just go ahead and search too. Like, oh, okay, I can just, let's type in, send this one, whatever the hell that is. And there we go. Actually, like type it right. There we go. So I've got Synatheas. I can see right there. It's grayed out for me. I'm good to go. Just go ahead and grab those items. And I can configure the tabs. I can sort it all. I can do whatever the hell I want. And it gives me a lot of player agency over the many mechanics and systems within this game. For the end game, what we're going to be looking at is the monolith system. And there are also dungeons in the game that you can do, and you can like gamble at the end of them to try to increase your rewards. It's basically a gold sink. But the big draw here is the monolith system. And once you kind of beat the game, you have all these many monoliths to jump into. At the end of every monolith is a specific boss. And that specific boss has specific uniques or set drops that you can kind of target farm. So all these things are a really cool portion of this. And this goes really, really high all the way up here. All sorts of cool things. But taking a look at this, this is going to be pretty overwhelming. So I'm going to try to step you into it from a review perspective rather than a guide perspective. And you start these monoliths at one set location. And from there, you'll go to another location like this one. And then it'll unlock this area over here. And then you'll be able to see what's out in this direction. These things pretty much just expand outward. And these things are called echoes. And basically, it's a map. It's a themed map. Okay, I'm going to go here. It's going to be a snow map. And I'm going to have these modifiers on my right. Certain things that are going to be boons to me that last for certain amounts of echoes or buffs to enemies. And then I'll get a big reward if I do not die while doing it. And I'm going to zoom out here just to kind of show you what this is like. And this looks kind of crazy, but it all started from this location right here. So you just branched out one at a time. You can see the little blue path of what I took. But you'll go through doing all of these in whatever way you want. It's all randomly done. You just choose them and you go and you do it. You choose them, you go and you do it. And you can see at the top up here, you've got these little check marks. Well, the echoes power up this stability bar. And you do this one, and then you do this one, then you fight the final boss here. And anytime you die doing one of these quest echoes, you lose stability. So this is my stability bar right now. If I lose this boss fight enough times, which is the ultimate boss for the entire monolith, then this will fall beyond this, and I have to go do another one of these little side echoes to re-empower it. And ultimately, this comes down to ways to get specific items, right? Like, hey, you know what? I need a new rare body armor piece. Well, here you go. Or I need set items. Let's just go over here and kind of roll the dice and see what we can get. Or maybe over here, I need new daggers. You know, mama needs some new daggers. Or maybe I need rare relics or idols, whatever it is. Glyphs over here, affix shards. There's gold. There's keys for the dungeons, for arenas. All sorts of stuff. You just can spot farm it. And it's a very fun way to do the end game. So now that I've shown this off, I'm just going to show some end game gameplay, but I want to talk over that and give you a little bit more information on this. Going through each one of these monoliths, these echoes, it can seem, man, dude, that's a huge power sink. What I actually like here is that these echoes are going to be tailor-built to your amount of time dedication you want, if you want to call it. You can knock out a single echo in less than 5 minutes, very easily, and that's not with an optimized build or anything like that. All the gameplay you're seeing actually is just on my Primalist Beastmaster. You'll see at one point I'll open up my skills or passive screen. I don't have all my skills and passives invested because of the newest patch. So this is not an optimized build. It's not even a net build. It's kind of a haggard build, and I'm still just blowing through a lot of stuff with relative ease. And I can also, though, turn a sub 5 minute echo into like a 5-10 minute one if I want to just kind of completely clear the map of all enemies, maybe increasing or taking advantage of any rarity increased drop chance that I've unlocked with these echoes that are empowering my character or whatever it is. So you can make more of the end game in the way that makes sense for you, if that sentence even makes sense. But I guess I'm saying is it's a little bit more, you know, approach it how you want, not how the game is telling you to on rails. Whereas if you look at something like, okay, endless amounts of Duriel grinding, or going and just doing tons of ball runs, or just doing tons of runs in Path of Exile because I haven't played it in 6 years, so I don't know what the top tier stuff to raid is anymore. So doing those things, yeah, that's kind of the nature of an action RPG, is kind of smashing your face against the wall of an endgame grind. But at least with this endgame, I feel like I'm moving things across faster. Maybe I'm making little tiny shifts rather than big sweeping ones that all in one motion. But if I can do like 5 or 6 echoes before I go to sleep and then come back online tomorrow, maybe do a couple more echoes. Oh, okay, cool. Hey, tonight I've actually unlocked the boss. Let's go do the boss tonight. What I like about that is if I want to sink 3 hours into it and grind out a whole entire monolith and knock out a boss, or maybe 2 monoliths and knock out a boss, I definitely can. Or if I just have a little bit of bite-sized amounts of time, I still feel like I'm progressing something. And I think that that is something that a lot of ARPGs, or just games in general, get away from. There seems to be some sort of like fall-off point between a small amount of time invested, not feeling like anything, and a massive amount of time invested, still kind of not feeling like anything. So what I like about this end game is that I do get to do a lot in a little bit of time, or a lot in a lot of time, which I like that kind of return for me. I not feel like I'm just kind of, okay, I did like 15 ball runs and I got one unique, and it was a crap unique. It's not even for the one I'm doing in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Or maybe I did a ton of Duriel runs and I got the stupid thorn chest, whatever the hell it is, millions of times, and I didn't get the Helmet of Gods or whatever the hell the other one is. Like, that's my point. I still feel like I'm progressing something because every step I've taken in the Echo is a measured step towards something I want. Affix shards, which are a currency I'm going to be using. Glyphs and runes, I'm going to just be using those. A chance at a rare item. Okay, well, I'll take that roll. Or a chance at a set item. And remember, too, you can use stuff like runes and glyphs to make crafting really cool, to make it really fun. Like, hey, I can use a Rune of Ascendance on a rare chest piece that I wanted, and I got the base one. Boom, I got it from the Echo. I rolled it into the unique or the set item I wanted. Bam, I just made out like a bandito. You can have a lot of really fun stuff with that end game, but it all culminates in the blessings. And the blessings are ways to make that end game feel less grindy. So you get these active blessings whenever you complete a monolith. So here's the very first one. I discovered these three. And what happens is I chose one of the three. If I go to do the monolith again, it will roll more and I'll discover more blessings. And I can choose to swap this one out or not. So what I like about this is it allows me to do the same content over for direct power rewards to my character that aren't drops. Hey, you know what? Take a look at the map. I just finished the Monolith of Fate. It's in all the gameplay you've watched here. And that's like the end of the middle of the game. Once you kind of go through the this Monolith of Fate, the ending of the storm, not the Monolith of Fate. Once you get these three knocked out, the game is like, okay, have at it. You just now have the rest of the road in front of you. You just did your first monolith quest where it's three of them. Knock out the next three, knock out the next three, so on and so forth. But what's cool is it's like that at that point you can say, well, I could jump to the 85, but I'd really like to go increase my power through one of these. Or maybe there's a boss here that drops something in specific I really want for my build. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to do the Stolen Plans and do that boss again to try to get the drop that I want. And that's what I mean about you go through that again and you complete it, and maybe you didn't get the drop you wanted, but at least now we can go over here and take a look at this and swap out some blessings, do something different with my blessings. And that's what I mean. You're still getting player power for going through a portion of the game to hunt something that you didn't end up getting. And it all culminates in the factions here, the Circle of Fortune and the Merchants Guild. I talk about this later in the video, and I think I actually messed up the Circle of Fortune portion, the name I mean. And this is another big portion of the end game where we don't really know the long-lasting effect on everything just yet. Circle of Fortune basically kind of caters and changes the way your drops happen. If I show you at the very end here, when a set item would drop, the whole set drops instead. Versus the Merchants Guild, I'm basically getting access to higher ranks to buy more items and different items. You can buy all exalted items in the bazaar or directly from other players. And I'll talk about in the negative portion of this video why the faction system can ultimately be a negative thing when it comes to the Merchants Guild, but I think by and large this is another big portion of the end game that not a lot of reviews have talked about because we don't really know what its actual effect is going to be because the economy in both is not really set up. We don't have people really progressing super hard in the end game yet because the game just came out. Well, it fully launched in 1.0 with the faction system included in it. So we don't know how the economy of the Merchants Guild is going to shake out. No one's crunched the numbers on how the Circle of Fortune is really going to progress your end game. My hypothesis, my theory is the Circle of Fortune will be very good when you first jump into factions. Then the Merchants Guild will take over and become really powerful throughout the middle portion of the faction, kind of climb. But I think then the Circle of Fortune will come back out to being on top, just because of the point is the true end game is those tier 6 and 7 drops, that stuff that you just cannot get through any kind of purchasing. And items from prophecies are duplicated when a set item is dropped. You just get way more bang for your buck with these echoes, these monoliths, everything that you're doing. If you go do the dungeons and you go gamble, it drops a set item, boom, you got the whole entire set instead. So I think the Circle of Fortune is that good top end. But again, I don't really know yet. We don't really know how this is going to shake out. But I think that kind of makes the end game kind of exciting because we don't really know how this is going to truly affect everything. Now, as far as some long-term things that the company has planned for Last Epoch, they've said that they want to kind of expand the way the game is played in the same way you would expect any ARPG. More things with every cycle, different mechanics, different ways to manipulate existing mechanics, hopeful expansions to masteries and classes, maybe a whole full-fledged expansion to the game, so on and so forth. Also with the way that they approach cycles and how those cycles fall down to legacy characters is still something that they've said is more open to feedback than just simply set in stone for them. And this is something that I really like about the development of this game. During early access, I'd play the game, I'd hop on in the evening, play a little bit, and the devs would just come on and talk in global chat and hang out. And it wasn't just like, hey, it's an AMA, go ahead and ask me things. They would answer questions. They would talk about the things that they like and dislike in the real world. They were people. And that's kind of rare that you get that in a modern day when it comes to development. And I think, too, from watching the Last Epoch Discord server and their hour-by-hour update of what's been going on with the servers as they've dealt with the issues of launch, it's interesting to see that they've gone from being a very open and very communicative dev group to kind of being a little bit more reserved now because of a lot of the vitriol that they've received from people that don't really understand, I guess, maybe how all this kind of plays its hand together, right? Like how server infrastructure works or any of those things. I don't know how it works. I just trust people that are smarter than me to tell me what to do. So I think that all stands to reason as what we've seen the last 5 years or 4 years as how they've approached dev. It's been very reactive in a positive way, not reactive in the common game development way of, hey, we have a vocal minority that wants a really bad improvement to the game. We're going to go ahead and do it. And it ends up ostracizing more than it actually fixes things. So I think the development for Last Epoch will match that level of just being an open forum where people ultimately bandwagon onto the stuff that they want to see improved on the game versus just like, hey, you know what, this is hard. I want it fixed. I want it fixed, and slamming the gates until it's fixed. They don't seem to be moving in that direction when it comes to development, which to me speaks volumes for the future of this game. So with all these great things we've been talking about with Last Epoch, what are some of the bad things? What are some of the downfalls of the game or shortcomings, whatever it is? And I think that a lot of this comes down to maybe the development house compared to AAA studios, right? And I know that's not really necessarily a fair shot to fire, but I think that a lot of people will look at that merit. They'll sit there and say, hey, well, this doesn't look as nice and as polished as, you know, X AAA studio that's doing this or that. And I think it's still a valid claim. Counterpoint to it, though, is that there have been a lot of improvements on the animation, on the improvements to the graphics over the entire time of the early access, and a huge overhaul right at 1.0. But it still has to be said that the polish of certain animations and stuff like that are going to exist within this game, as it's still an ever-growing kind of platform for this company as they expand Last Epoch over the next couple of whatever years, right? But like I said, the kind of portrayal of the narrative, the digestion of that narrative too, and the kind of use overall of graphics when it comes to animations and the kind of wonky look that sometimes things can have when it comes to showing off certain combat animations is all part of an overall detractor that I think a lot of people will look at when making the comparison to other action RPGs in the genre that have that larger AAA budget. So it is worth bringing that up. And another big thing is about the end game. Now, I like the end game. Personally, for me, when it comes to action RPGs, I want mindless killings of hordes of monsters all the time for items. And a lot of people like that, and a lot of people don't like that. I think it kind of comes down to your particular taste when it comes to action RPGs and what you want out of them. If you want very pointed end game scenarios where you are doing very specific missions with very specific stuff and so on and so forth, maybe Last Epoch isn't necessarily for you. But if you want a end game where you're just simply sinking time after time into all these different maps with all these different types of looks and trying to work on the little monolith mini game to get more stuff, that is definite part of it. But I think too, part of that, there's also kind of like the end game. And that is the final kind of gear grind, right? As you've hit the max level, you've maxed out the majority of your character. Now you're trying to get those tier 7 shards. You're trying, well, tier 7 affixes to get your stuff as boosted as possible. You're trying to remove stuff. I think that that's when things start to get a little hairy. That's when you start to look at it and go, man, I kind of feel like I'm maybe slamming my head against the wall on something that is overall maybe repetitive for me. And that's where I'm saying you're going to find out whether or not you like that style of ARPG or you need a pointed approach to the end game. And also, there are the new merchant guilds, or the new guilds. So we have a merchant guild and the something of fate, the circle of fate or whatever it is. This is an end game experience that has been added in 1.0, and we don't really have a lot of knowledge as to how this is going to affect the end game. Basically, you choose one of the two guilds. One of them is going to be focused on increasing stuff that drops. Maybe you have a set item that drops, rather than just simply the set item, the entire set drops. These are all really cool things. Or if you join the merchant guild, you go to the bazaar and you can actually use the in-game currency of money that you cannot buy that, well, outside of bots, which I'm about to get to, but you can't buy that currency. There's no pay to win with this game. So you have to farm money that you then can use to buy items that you want for your end game progression. So those two things kind of are going to be interesting, because I feel like one of them, the Circle of Fate or whatever it's called, will progress to a point where it gets outmatched by the Merchant Guild, where you can buy stuff. And then at the very end, deep end game, where all you're worried about is drops, that Circle of Fate comes back and starts feeling better than the Merchant Guild. But this is kind of a bit of the bad here that I'm trying to bring up, is the Merchant Guild is geared around money, and it's going to, some way in shape or form, empower bots that are trying to either power level you or sell you in-game currency. And I think that that's going to be ultimately a detractor for this game, but not like this doesn't exist in every other online game ever, right? So hopefully the team can find a way to kind of combat that, and it doesn't become a huge draw or suck from the game, because one of the most annoying things with playing online games now is just being spammed with bots that tell you to buy their shilly weird stuff. So those are two of the bigger detractors of this series. And I think, too, this game also is ultimately an action RPG. And if you are not comfortable with the way that cycles or seasons work, then you might still get that same level of burn that you got from Diablo 4 if you came into Diablo 4 having not played an action RPG for a long time. And as I've said plenty of times in this video, if you're playing this genre, that is part of the way of playing the genre. So you can just simply hang out on the legacy server and get whatever permanent content is added to the game when it is added. They said if it's added, it'll be added at the beginning of a cycle, not at the end. So that is at least a good thing. Every new cycle possibly poses the chance to give you more things to play with your existing legacy characters. But I think these are two of the big things that not only am I bringing up, but I think have been brought up quite a bit in a lot of the reviews I've seen online, where people talk about maybe the polish of the game versus AAA studios, or they talk about the end game versus all the end games out there. And it's worth noting too that a lot of those reviews that compare the end games of other games in the genre, they're comparing the end games of, say, Path of Exile, which has almost 10 full years now of being out, and we have Path of Exile 2, which is going to only improve upon that full decade of development and improvement on an end game scenario. So I think that it stands to reason that we could see that kind of same improvement here with Last Epoch. Those are some bad things, some things that are overall negative and detractors that I find about the game in its current iteration. So with all that being said, what's my overall opinion? What do I think about the game? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious I love it, right? This whole goddamn review has been biased as hell. But I need to also lay this groundwork. It's very common and very easy for people to hate in the gaming industry. You're going to see 10 more articles of hating a subject or not liking a subject or this is why that subject failed than you are going to see wholesome ones that promote the positive side of things. The very first game series I ever played as a kid was Diablo 1. Diablo is my favorite game series. I've been to 2 BlizzCons. I've applied to Blizzard multiple times. I wanted to work at Blizzard more than anything. And now I run a YouTube channel and I'm my own boss. So that worked out better for me. But my point is, I love Diablo 4. I'm not telling you to go buy it. You can do whatever you want with your own money. So this review of Last Epoch isn't coming from an angle of finger wagging at Diablo 4. It's coming from an angle of someone who is so hyped up for Diablo 4, played the balls off of Diablo 4, still loves Diablo 4, but sees Last Epoch as a stronger, better move forward for the action RPG genre. And that's saying a lot, because this is a small dev house. It's a whole brand new approach to a lot of things. It's taken quality of life improvements from a lot of other action RPGs, and it's made them really work very well. There are snags, there are bugs, there are issues, there are not 100% polish. And that's why, I think like the rare 10 out of 10 games aren't true 10 out of 10s a lot of the time. Like I look at Ocarina of Time. Yeah, that bad boy is a 10 out of 10. But I don't think anything that's come out in the last 3 years is a true 10 out of 10 game. I think most things are 9. They've got room to improve. And I'd much rather buy a 9 with room to improvement than a sterling 10. Because that means now I'm starting to look at it critically. And I think that it's good to look at a game like Last Epoch critically. It has a strong endgame, and I think that the majority of gamers that play Last Epoch are going to love the endgame. They're not going to get to the endgame exhaustion because they themselves will move on to the next game. Dragon's Dogma is a month away from this release. The majority of people playing this game, that's like 200, 300,000 concurrent players or whatever it is the time of this video going live, a lot of those people are going to move to Dragon's Dogma. They'll probably have gotten a character to level 75 or so. I think being realistic about your approach to games should be more indicative of how they're going to perform for you. What do you want out of this game? Are you a father with kids? Or a wife with kids, who cares? Are you anyone with kids and you just don't want to sink tons and tons and tons of hours into a game? Last Epoch's going to be for you. Do you want to get sweaty and really get into a grindy end game? Last Epoch is actually still going to be for you. I think just coming into this game, though, having your expectations set with what you want out of it. Do you want to make a ton of different characters with a ton of diversity and build viability? It's still going to be for you. But do you want to play a game that has a really good, strong narrative, and all you have time for is just a really nice and tight campaign that you can then just kind of walk away from and go, man, that's a provocative story? Not necessarily going to be Last Epoch. Do you want a really complex system where you're just going to sit there for hours and stare at it and kind of learn all the little nuance? There's parts of that here, but really it's not going to be Last Epoch. So hopefully I've kind of drummed up enough examples or shown you enough of a path one direction or another that it's going to help you out in deciding if you want to jump into Last Epoch. I think you're going to really enjoy your time, and it's only a $35 game. I think that's also a huge underlying current I haven't talked enough about. This isn't a $70 game. This is not a full kick in the dick here, right? It's a nice $35 package. You're going to get a lot for it. If we're talking like an hour per dollar, you could easily get 35 hours out of this game and still have plenty more to spare without even having scratched the surface of much of the end game. So hopefully this helps you out in deciding whether or not you want to jump into Last Epoch. I've got tons of guides I'm making on the game right now, tons of guides coming up, but you know what? This game's been out forever, for 4 or 5 years, like I've said. Jump into all the amazing content creators that are out there that have guides that exist. My information, sure, cool, it'll be relevant to whatever it came out, but these are people that have been in the trenches doing this, watching every single little change. A lot of the people that have come over from other action RPGs like Woody Joe or Rax, they've also been playing this every so often here and there. So jump into a lot of the big action ARPG content creators because their content's going to be geared more towards actual information versus just, flavor of the month, clickbait, let me grab a couple clicks and move on to the next subject. So take a look on YouTube. You're going to find a lot of really cool people out there that have made a lot of really good content. Even if you see it being a year or two old, go ahead and click it because it's still actually relevant. Majority of the time, they still update their guides, and a lot of it is still relevant too because a lot of that information hasn't changed from class to class. Like take, for example, the Rune Master, only in the last patch did it get a little bit of a nerf, a 25% damage debuff to its turret. The rest of the builds are, for the most part, very relevant. They might play a little bit different, but this is kind of the strength of this game. Even a non-meta build is a very strong build because you can still lean into the direction the build has been made for. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. Did I miss anything that you really wanted to shout about how great this game is? Or did I miss something that you really want to shout is terrible about this game and you want people to know before they buy it so they can make an informed decision? Please, as always, let it be known in the comment section below. But have a good one and take care.